The slap echoed through the mountain cafe like a gunshot. Caleb Ward's head barely moved. His daughter's juice box hit the floor, rolling toward the table where Victoria Hayes sat frozen, her coffee halfway to her lips. The drunk towered over him, fist cocked back, spit flying as he screamed about some imagined slight. But Caleb just stood there, utterly still, hands loose at his sides, eyes empty of everything except a terrible, practiced calm that made Victoria's breath catch in her throat. She'd seen that look before. On her brother, 3 years ago. Right before he disappeared into a classified mission that ended with a folded flag and no body to bury. The drunk swung again. And this time Caleb moved. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. If you want to know how a chance encounter in a Colorado cafe became a race against time to save a man the world declared dead, how a single father with no past and a corporate executive with too much power joined forces to challenge governments, cartels, and their own damaged hearts, then stay with me until the very end. And please hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The morning started the way most of Caleb Ward's mornings started, with his daughter singing off-key in the backseat of his pickup truck. "Dad, you're not listening!" Emma's voice cut through his thoughts like a warm knife through butter. 7 years old, gap-toothed, with braids that never quite stayed tight no matter how many YouTube tutorials he watched. "I'm listening, sweetheart." Caleb adjusted the rearview mirror to catch her reflection. She was holding up a drawing, another one of those elaborate scenes she created with crayons that cost more than his first car. "That's beautiful." "You didn't even look at it." He had looked. He was always looking. Hypervigilant, the VA counselor called it. A symptom, not a choice. Even now, driving through the sleepy streets of Silver Ridge, Colorado, his eyes tracked every vehicle, every pedestrian, every anomaly in the pattern of small-town morning traffic. "It's a castle," Emma continued, undeterred by his distraction. "And that's me, and that's you, and that's—" "Emma, we've talked about this." The third figure in the drawing. Always the same, a woman with long hair and a crown. Not her mother. Emma barely remembered her mother, and Caleb had made peace with that particular ghost years ago. No, this woman was different every time Emma drew her. Different hair color, different dress, different smile, but always there. "She's just a princess, Dad. All castles have princesses." Caleb pulled into the parking lot of the Ridge Café, a converted log cabin that served the best breakfast in 3 counties and doubled as the town's unofficial meeting hall, gossip center, and occasional courtroom of public opinion. Saturday mornings meant pancakes. It meant normalcy. It meant building the kind of childhood memories that could withstand the weight of everything he couldn't tell her about who he used to be. The bell above the door chimed as they entered. The smell of coffee and maple syrup wrapped around them like a familiar blanket. Martha, the owner, waved from behind the counter, 60-something, silver hair in a bun, reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. "Well, if it isn't my favorite artist," Martha beamed at Emma. "I saved your table, honey." Their usual booth, window view, back to the wall, exit routes visible. Caleb told himself it was because Emma liked watching the birds, but they both knew better. He'd just gotten Emma settled with her coloring books when the cafe door opened again. The woman who walked in didn't belong. Caleb's awareness sharpened instantly, that old familiar combat readiness flooding his nervous system before his conscious mind even registered why. She wore tailored pants and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Designer sunglasses pushed up into dark hair cut in a style that said boardroom, not mountain town. She moved with the kind of careful confidence that came from navigating spaces where she was constantly evaluated, constantly performing. She scanned the cafe with the methodical precision of someone conducting a threat assessment, and when her eyes landed on him, just for a second, Caleb felt the strangest sensation. Recognition. Not hers. His. Something about the way she held her shoulders. The set of her jaw. The way her gaze didn't just observe but cataloged, prioritized, strategized. He'd known people who moved through the world like that. Most of them were dead now. She chose a table by the window, 2 rows from his booth. Close enough to overhear conversations, if you knew how to listen. Far enough to maintain plausible deniability if confronted. Caleb turned his attention back to Emma, who was narrating an elaborate story about the brave knight, always him in her stories, who protected the castle from dragons. "The dragons are scared of him," Emma explained, her crayon moving in fierce purple strokes across the page. Because he's the strongest knight in the whole kingdom. Strength isn't just about fighting, Em. I know. It's about protecting people. That's what you always say. The door chimed again. This time, 3 men stumbled in, construction workers by the look of their boots and high-vis vests, though it was barely 9 a.m., and they already reeked of whiskey. The one in front, a bulky guy with a sun-scorched neck and eyes that couldn't quite focus, knocked into a chair and laughed too loudly at his own clumsiness. Martha's smile went tight. "Morning, boys. Coffee?" "Something stronger if you got it." The big one, Danny Reeves, Caleb recognized him now, worked for Hayes Mountain Construction, dropped into a booth with his friends. "We're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" Martha's tone suggested she already regretted asking. "Jimmy here just got divorced." Danny slapped one of his companions on the back hard enough to make him wince. "Free man. No more nagging. No more—" His voice carried across the cafe, crude and getting cruder. Caleb saw Emma's crayon slow, her attention drifting toward the noise. He gently redirected her focus. "Tell me more about the princess." But the woman in cashmere had noticed too. Her posture had changed, fractionally. She was listening. The situation deteriorated quickly. Danny stood up, swaying, and announced he needed to take a leak. On his way to the bathroom, he veered past Caleb's booth, close enough that Emma had to pull her coloring book back to avoid his elbow. "Excuse me, sweetheart." Danny's grin was sloppy, unfocused. Then his attention shifted to Caleb. "Ward, didn't see you there." "Danny." Caleb's voice was neutral, carefully empty. "You still fixing cars for old ladies and charging half what you should?" Danny leaned against the booth, invading their space with the casual entitlement of someone who'd never learned boundaries. "That's your problem, man. Too nice. No spine." "Not interested, Danny." "Yeah? Maybe if you had some spine, your wife wouldn't have—" Caleb stood up in one fluid motion. Not aggressive, just present, occupying space. The cafe went quiet. Danny was bigger than Caleb by maybe 30 pounds, most of it in his chest and gut. But something in Caleb's stillness made him take half a step back. "Emma," Caleb said quietly, not taking his eyes off Danny. "Go sit with Martha for a minute." "But, Dad—" "Now, sweetheart." Emma scrambled out of the booth, her drawing clutched to her chest, and Martha was already moving to intercept her, guiding her behind the counter with practiced efficiency. "Relax, Ward." Danny's friends had stood up now too, forming a loose semicircle. "Just joking around. Can't you take a joke?" "Go back to your table." "Or what?" Danny's bourbon courage was rebuilding itself, feeding on the audience. "You gonna make me? Big bad Caleb Ward fixing transmissions and raising his kid alone like some kind of—" The slap came out of nowhere. 1 second Danny was talking. The next, his meaty palm cracked across Caleb's face with enough force to snap his head to the side. The cafe held its breath. Caleb's cheek bloomed red. He could taste blood where his teeth had cut the inside of his mouth. Every muscle in his body had tensed, old training screaming at him to respond, to neutralize the threat, to end this in the 3 seconds it would take to put Danny on the floor and make sure he never got up without help. But he didn't move. He stood there, absolutely still, his hands loose at his sides, his face empty of everything except that terrible, practiced calm. Danny's fist was cocked back for another swing when Martha's voice cracked like a whip. "Danny Reeves, you get out of my cafe right now or I'm calling Sheriff Hawkins." From her table by the window, Victoria Hayes watched the scene unfold with the analytical precision that had made her one of the most successful defense contractors in the country. She cataloged everything: the way Ward's daughter had obeyed instantly, no hesitation, the way Ward's body had shifted into a stance that looked casual but positioned him between the threat and every civilian in the room. The way his breathing had slowed, not quickened. The way he'd taken a hit and chosen not to retaliate. Not because he couldn't, because he wouldn't. She'd seen that control before, in men trained to kill with their hands, in operators who'd learned that violence was a tool, not an emotion. In her brother Marcus, the night before he deployed on his final mission. The night before the mission that killed him. Danny and his friends were being herded toward the door by Martha and a couple of regulars who'd had enough of the disruption. Danny was still yelling, something about Ward being a coward, about teaching him a lesson later. Ward didn't react. He just walked calmly to the counter, knelt down beside his daughter, and checked her over with hands that were perfectly steady. "I'm okay, Dad." Emma's voice was small. "He's just drunk." "I know, baby. Let's get you home." He left a 20 on the counter, way too much for a breakfast they hadn't eaten, and guided Emma toward the door. Victoria made a decision. She stood up, intercepted him at the exit. Up close, she could see the mark on his face, already darkening. Could see the pale circle on his ring finger where a wedding band used to be. Could see eyes that had witnessed things most people only saw in nightmares. "Excuse me," she said. He stopped, his body angling slightly to keep his daughter partially behind him. Protective. Always protective. That was... Victoria struggled for words that wouldn't sound patronizing. Restrained. Not interested in a fight. His voice was quiet, controlled. The voice of someone who'd learned to manage every variable, including his own reactions. "No. You're interested in protecting your daughter." Victoria glanced at Emma, who was studying her with open curiosity. "Smart. Most men would have swung back. Most men haven't learned what I've learned." There it was. The confirmation she'd been searching for. "What's your name?" Victoria asked, though she'd already decided to find out everything about him before the day was over. "Caleb Ward, this is Emma." Emma waved, still clutching her drawing. "Are you a princess?" Victoria blinked. "What?" "Emma," Caleb said gently. We talked about this. "But she has nice clothes and she looks important and we should go." Caleb's hand rested on Emma's shoulder, guiding her toward the door. But he paused, looked back at Victoria with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're not from around here." "No, Denver. I'm looking into some things." "In Silver Ridge?" "Nearby." She extended her hand. "Victoria Hayes." He shook it, his grip firm but brief. Professional. "Be careful. These mountains have a way of hiding things people don't want found." Then he was gone, the door chiming behind him, leaving Victoria standing in the cafe with a half-drunk cup of coffee and a growing certainty that she'd just found the one person who could answer the questions that had been destroying her for 3 years. Bull. Martha appeared at her elbow, refilling her cup without asking. "That's Caleb Ward, good man, quiet. Showed up about 3 years ago with that little girl and not much else. Bought Joe Patterson's old auto shop, fixed it up, lives in the apartment above it. Keeps to himself mostly." 3 years ago? Victoria's pulse quickened. "You're sure about that?" "Pretty sure. Emma was just 4 when they arrived. Tiny little thing. Caleb didn't talk much about where they came from. People respect that around here. Everyone's got a past they're running from or toward." Victoria pulled out her phone, typed a quick message to her assistant. "Need everything on Caleb Ward, Silver Ridge, Colorado. Priority." 3 years ago was when her brother had disappeared. When Operation Sandstone, a classified mission she wasn't supposed to know about, had ended in chaos and body bags. When the Pentagon had handed her a folded flag and words about sacrifice and service, and never told her what really happened in that compound in the Badlands. When they'd told her Marcus Hayes, Captain, U.S. Army Special Forces, was dead. No body. Just circumstantial evidence and a lot of classified redactions. She'd spent 3 years using every resource at her disposal, and as CEO of Hayes Defense Systems, she had considerable resources to find answers. 3 years of dead ends, stonewalled investigations, and carefully worded threats from people in positions of power who really wanted her to stop asking questions. And now, in a mountain cafe in the middle of nowhere, she'd just met a man who appeared out of nowhere 3 years ago. A man with the kind of training that took years to acquire and left permanent marks on how you moved through the world. A man whose daughter talked about castles and knights and protecting people. A man who knew how to take a hit without flinching. Victoria left the cafe and walked to her rental car, her mind already working through logistics. Her phone buzzed before she'd even started the engine. Found him. Caleb Ward. No digital footprint before 36 months ago. No credit history, no employment records, nothing. Current business license for Ward's Auto Repair residential address. Same. One daughter, Emma, enrolled in Silver Ridge Elementary. No marriage certificate on file in Colorado. I'm digging deeper, but this guy's a ghost before 2022. Victoria's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She'd learned to trust her instincts in boardrooms and negotiations, in the endless chess game of defense contracts and political maneuvering that defined her professional life. And her instincts were screaming that Caleb Ward was connected to her brother. The question was how. Booked it. The auto shop sat at the edge of town, a squat metal building with a hand-painted sign that read, Ward's Auto Repair. Honest work, fair prices. The parking lot was empty except for an older pickup truck and a Honda with a flat tire. Victoria parked across the street, watching. Through the open bay door, she could see Caleb working under the hood of the Honda, his movements efficient and practiced. Emma sat on a rolling stool nearby, her drawing pad balanced on her knees, keeping up a steady stream of chatter that Caleb responded to with patient one-word answers. A bell chimed somewhere inside the shop. Caleb wiped his hands on a rag, said something to Emma that made her giggle, and disappeared into the office area. Victoria waited 5 minutes, then 10. When Caleb emerged, he was alone. Emma must have gone upstairs to the apartment. Good. What Victoria needed to discuss wasn't for a child's ears. She crossed the street, her heels clicking on the asphalt, impractical shoes for a mechanic's shop, but she'd learned long ago that appearing out of place was sometimes the best way to make people uncomfortable enough to tell the truth. Caleb looked up as she approached. No surprise in his expression. He'd known she was there. Of course he had. Miss Hayes. He didn't sound particularly welcoming. Mr. Ward, I'd like to talk to you about something. I figured. He set down the wrench he'd been holding, gave her his full attention. I don't talk about my past. I'm not interested in your past. I'm interested in a mission, 3 years ago. Operation Sandstone. The name hit him like a physical blow. Victoria saw it in the fractional tightening of his jaw, the way his breathing paused for just a second before resuming its steady rhythm. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Victoria stepped closer, her voice low and intense. My brother was on that mission, Captain Marcus Hayes. You were there. I know you were there. Caleb's eyes had gone flat, empty, the same terrible calm he'd shown in the cafe. Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, it would be classified. I couldn't talk about it if I wanted to. They told me he was dead. Then you have your answer. No body, just a flag and a lot of official sympathy. And a mission report so redacted it might as well be blank. Victoria's voice cracked despite her best efforts to maintain control. He's my brother, my only family, and I don't believe he's dead. I can't believe it, not without proof. Caleb looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened. Not much, just enough for her to see the grief underneath the armor. You should go home, Ms. Hayes, back to Denver, back to your life. Some answers won't bring you peace. They'll just give you new nightmares. I don't want peace. I want the truth. The truth is that missions go wrong. People die. And the ones who survive have to live with it. He picked up the wrench again, a clear dismissal. I've got work to do. Victoria didn't move. I know you were Army, Special Forces. I know your service record before 3 years ago is sealed so tight I can't even confirm you existed. I know that whatever happened on that mission changed you enough that you walked away from everything, changed your name, or at least buried your old one and came here to hide. I'm not hiding. I'm raising my daughter. While working as a mechanic in a town of 3,000 people when you could probably run security for any major corporation in the country. Victoria shook her head. That's hiding, Mr. Ward, and I don't blame you. Whatever happened must have been hell. But my brother was there, and if there's even a chance he's alive, he's not. The words came out hard and final. Caleb set down the wrench again, faced her fully. His eyes held a kind of exhausted pain that Victoria recognized because she saw it in her mirror every morning. I was there, he said quietly, in the Badlands, when everything went to hell. And I'm telling you, for your own good, let it go. Marcus gave an order to split the team. Some of us got out. Most didn't. That's war. That's the job. And dwelling on it won't change anything. You saw him die? Caleb hesitated, just a fraction of a second. But it was enough. No, he admitted. The firefight was chaotic. We scattered. I had civilians to evacuate. By the time I got back to the rally point, the compound was burning and half the team was down. Marcus was... He stopped, struggled with something. I don't know what happened to him. No one does. The bodies we recovered were burned beyond recognition. DNA testing took months. Some identifications were made based on dog tags and personal effects. Your brother's tags were found in the rubble. But not his body. Not intact. No! Victoria felt something crack open in her chest, hope and despair fighting for dominance. Then he could still be... Don't. Caleb's voice was sharp now, almost angry. Don't do that to yourself. I've seen people chase ghosts for years, convince themselves that maybe, somehow, their loved one survived. It destroys them. Whatever closure the flag and the ceremony gave you, hold on to it. Don't trade it for false hope. It's not false if there's a chance. There's always a chance. There's also reality. He gestured around the shop, at the mundane normalcy of oil stains and spare parts. This is my reality now. Emma is my reality, and I won't go back to that world. Not even to chase ghosts. Victoria studied him, this man who'd walked away from everything to build a small, safe life for his daughter. Part of her respected it. The larger part wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him until he admitted there was more to the story. What if I told you I have new intelligence? She said quietly. Reports of an American prisoner being held in a compound across the border. Reports that match Marcus's description. Caleb went very still. Where did you get that intelligence? I have resources, contacts, people who owe me favors. She pulled out her phone, showed him a grainy photograph, a satellite image of a compound, partially obscured by trees. This was taken 4 days ago. My analysts say there's been unusual activity, supply deliveries, medical equipment. Someone's being kept there. Could be anyone, could be nothing. Could be my brother. Caleb looked at this image for a long time, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. Finally, even if that were true, and that's a massive if, you're talking about an extraction mission, covert, across international borders, the kind of operation that starts wars if it goes wrong. The Pentagon would never authorize it based on a satellite photo and hope. I'm not asking the Pentagon, I'm asking you. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. You want me to what? Mount a one-man rescue operation? I'm a mechanic, Ms. Hayes. I fix cars. I make my daughter breakfast and help with her homework and try to give her a normal childhood. I don't run missions anymore. You were the best, Marcus told me. Before he deployed, he said you were the best operator on his team. Smart, resourceful, and too stubborn to quit. Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to something almost pleading. If Marcus is alive, he's been held for 3 years. 3 years of hell I can't even imagine. And if there's someone who could get to that compound, verify whether it's him, and get out alive, it's you. No. Please, I'll pay whatever. It's not about money. Caleb's control finally cracked, his voice rising. You don't understand what you're asking. I have a daughter, a little girl who's already lost her mother and who depends on me to be here, to be present, to be safe. I can't risk her losing me too just because you can't accept that your brother is gone. And what happens when Emma asks you about her uncle someday? When she wants to know if you tried everything to bring him home? It was a low blow and Victoria knew it, but desperation made people cruel. Caleb's hands clenched into fists, released. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. Leave. Now. And don't come back. Mr. Ward, I mean it. You're not welcome here. He turned away, dismissing her completely. I'm sorry about your brother, I really am, but I can't help you. Victoria stood there for a moment, watching his rigid back, the set of his shoulders that screamed of old wounds reopened. She wanted to keep pushing, to deploy every argument and manipulation she'd learned in years of ruthless business negotiations. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the photo on the workbench, Emma grinning gap-toothed at the camera, her drawing of the castle clutched in her hands. Maybe it was recognition of someone fighting the same battle she was. The endless war between duty to the dead and responsibility to the living. I'm staying at the Silver Ridge Inn, she said quietly. Room 12, if you change your mind. She left without waiting for a response. Chug. That night, Victoria sat in her hotel room, surrounded by files, photographs, and maps. The intelligence on the compound was thin, too thin to base a military operation on, which was why the Pentagon had politely declined to investigate. But her instincts said it was real. The timing was right. The location fit. And there had been whispers, unconfirmed rumors from informants in the region about an American prisoner, someone important enough to keep alive. Her phone rang. Her assistant, calling with the deeper background check on Caleb Ward. "Tell me you found something." "More like I found nothing, which is interesting in itself." Papers rustled in the background. "Caleb Ward didn't exist before 2022, but I found discharge papers for a Captain Caleb Wardell, Army Special Forces, honorably discharged 8 months before your Caleb Ward showed up in Silver Ridge. Different middle initial. Same first and last name, close enough to be a lazy cover." Victoria's pulse quickened. "Where's Wardell now?" "That's the thing. His file is sealed. Everything after 2019 is classified above my clearance level, and I can get into most things. But I did find one interesting detail. Wardell's wife, Jennifer Wardell, died in 2021. Car accident. There's a daughter listed as survivor, Emma Wardell, age 4 at the time." Emma, the girl in the shop with her drawings of castles and princesses. "So he took his daughter and disappeared," Victoria said slowly. "Changed his name enough to avoid casual searches, but not enough to create a completely new identity. He wanted to fade, not vanish." "Looks like it. And boss, I cross-referenced his service dates with your brothers. They were in the same unit, same deployment rotation. If there was an Operation Sandstone and your brother was on it, Ward was definitely there too." Victoria closed her eyes, feeling pieces of the puzzle click into place. He saw Marcus die, or saw him taken, and it broke something in him. Broke it enough that he walked away from everything. "What are you going to do?" "Good question. Push harder and risk driving Ward deeper into his protective shell? Back off and watch her only lead disappear? Deploy the resources at her disposal to force his hand? Or trust that someone who dedicated his life to protecting people would eventually choose to help?" "I'm going to wait," Victoria decided. "Give him time to think about it, and hope that whatever loyalty he felt for Marcus is stronger than his fear." She ended the call and stared at the photograph of the compound, at the grainy satellite image that might or might not show her brother's prison. 3 years. If Marcus was alive, he'd been surviving in hell for 3 years. Every day she waited was another day of suffering, but forcing Ward's hand could doom them all. So she would wait, at least for a little while, and pray that the man who wouldn't fight had enough fight left in him to make this choice. Caleb didn't sleep that night. He lay in his small apartment above the shop, listening to Emma's soft breathing from the room next door, and stared at the ceiling. Victoria Hayes's words circled his mind like vultures. What happens when Emma asks you about her uncle someday? Marcus Hayes had been more than a commanding officer. He'd been a friend, the kind of brother-in-arms you only found in combat, when life and death decisions became the currency of trust. The night everything went wrong, Marcus had made a choice. Split the team. Send Caleb with the civilians, women and children from a village caught in the crossfire of forces they didn't understand. Get them out while Marcus and the others created a diversion. It was the right call. Tactically sound. Strategically necessary. It still felt like abandonment. Caleb had gotten the civilians out, had watched the compound burn from 3 clicks away, the smoke rising against a blood-red sky, had waited at the rally point for survivors who never came, had filed reports that got redacted into meaningless scraps of paper, had attended funerals with empty caskets and accepted condolences for men whose bodies were never found. And then he'd gone home to his wife, who was already dying from cancer she'd hidden from him for months, and his 4-year-old daughter, who didn't understand why Daddy had nightmares and why Mommy couldn't get out of bed anymore. Jennifer had lasted 8 more months, long enough to make him promise to give Emma a good life, a safe life, a normal life away from the ghosts and the missions and the endless cycle of violence that military service demanded. He'd kept that promise, walked away from everything, found this quiet town, built this small business, learned to be present, learned to be a father instead of a soldier. And now Victoria Hayes was asking him to risk all of it, for a ghost, for a maybe, for a brother he'd left behind. Caleb got up, careful not to wake Emma, and went to the small safe hidden in his closet. Inside were things he'd kept from his old life. Dog tags, a photo of his unit, service medals he'd never displayed, and a letter. He unfolded it carefully, though he'd memorized every word years ago. Marcus's handwriting, penned the night before the mission that killed him. Caleb, if you're reading this, things went sideways. Don't blame yourself. We knew the risks. But if something happens to me, do me a favor. Look after my sister. Victoria's tough as nails, but she's stubborn as hell, and she'll tear herself apart trying to find answers that don't exist. Make her understand that some sacrifices are worth making. Make her understand that I made mine willingly, and make her let go. She deserves a life that isn't haunted by me. M. Caleb had never contacted Victoria, never fulfilled that particular promise. Told himself it was better to let her grieve than to give her false hope, but now she'd found him, and she wasn't asking him to help her let go. She was asking him to help her hold on. He put the letter back in the safe, locked it, and returned to bed. But sleep didn't come, because deep down, in the part of himself he'd tried to bury, Caleb knew the truth. If there was even a chance Marcus was alive, he had to try. Not for Victoria, not even for Marcus. For himself. For the guilt that had eaten at him for 3 years. For the knowledge that he'd followed orders and saved lives and done everything right, and it still wasn't enough. For the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could bring his brother home. The knock came at 6 a.m., just as the first light was breaking over the mountains. Victoria was already awake, had been for hours. Her laptop open to satellite imagery and intelligence reports that felt increasingly inadequate. She opened the door to find Caleb Ward standing in the hallway, still wearing yesterday's clothes, his face shadowed with exhaustion and something that looked like surrender. I need to see everything you have, he said without preamble. Every piece of intelligence, every satellite image, every report. And then I need you to tell me the truth about why you're really doing this. Victoria stepped back, letting him enter. The truth is simple. He's my brother. That's not all of it. Caleb moved to the table where she'd spread out her files, his eyes scanning the documents with practiced efficiency. You run Hayes Defense Systems, billion-dollar contracts, government connections at the highest levels. You could have authorized a Black Ops extraction months ago if you'd wanted to. Could have pulled strings, called in favors, made this happen through official channels. I tried. They said no. Why? Victoria hesitated, then decided he'd earned honesty. Because officially, Operation Sandstone never happened. The mission doesn't exist in any records I can access. The soldiers who died don't have their names on any memorial. And asking too many questions about it got me labeled as a security risk by people who really don't want certain things coming to light. Caleb's jaw tightened. What kind of things? The kind that involve illegal weapons testing, unsanctioned operations in sovereign territory, and enough diplomatic violations to start an international incident. She pulled out a heavily redacted document. This is what I finally managed to extract from a source at the Pentagon. Most of it's blacked out, but you can read between the lines. Operation Sandstone wasn't a rescue mission or a training exercise. It was a weapons demonstration that went catastrophically wrong. Weapons demonstration? Caleb's voice had gone quiet, dangerous. We were told we were extracting a high-value target, intelligence asset, in danger. You were told what you needed to hear to deploy. The reality was that Hayes Defense Systems, my company, had developed a new targeting system, experimental tech that was supposed to revolutionize precision strikes. The Pentagon wanted field testing before committing to full production. They set up a scenario, picked a compound that intelligence suggested housed enemy combatants, and sent your team in as both operators and observers. Caleb stared at her, and Victoria watched the pieces click together in his mind. Watched horror and rage war with understanding. The targeting system failed, he said flatly. That's why everything went to hell. Your company's equipment malfunctioned and got my team killed. Yes. The word cost her. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know until after. I was CEO in name only back then, still learning the business after my father died. The military contracts division operated independently. By the time I found out what they'd done, half your team was dead and the other half was scattered. And the Pentagon buried everything to avoid the scandal. And now you want to rescue your brother to what? Ease your guilt? Clean up your company's mess? I want to rescue my brother because he's my brother, and because he's been suffering for 3 years because of decisions I should have caught. Because I failed him. Victoria's voice cracked. I've spent every day since reading those reports trying to make it right. I shut down the weapons division, fired everyone involved, redirected the company toward defensive systems only. But none of that brings Marcus home. None of that gives him back the years he's lost. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents spread across the table. Finally, "Show me the compound." Victoria pulled up the satellite imagery on her laptop. "Here, approximately 40 miles across the border, in a region controlled by a warlord named Qasim Rajan. He's former military, well-connected, and has a reputation for keeping prisoners for leverage. If Marcus survived the initial mission, Rajan would have seen the value in an American Special Forces captain." "What kind of value?" "Intelligence, propaganda, ransom potential." She zoomed in on the compound. The structure matches reports from informants who've described an American prisoner, high-security wing, medical deliveries that suggest someone's being kept alive but controlled. Caleb leaned closer, his trained eye picking apart the compound's defenses. Guard rotations? Every 6 hours. 12 to 15 armed personnel on site at any given time. Access points? 3 main entrances. The north wall backs up to a ravine, difficult approach but possible. There's a supply delivery every Tuesday morning, same truck, same driver. Interior layout? That's where it gets thin. I have floor plans from when the compound was built 12 years ago, but there's been construction since then. Unknown modifications. Caleb straightened, his expression unreadable. "This is a suicide mission. You understand that, right? One person, no backup, unknown interior, hostile territory. The odds of getting in, confirming Marcus is there, and getting out alive are maybe 20%, and that's being optimistic." "I know. And you're asking me to leave my daughter for those odds. I'm asking you to give my brother a chance, the same chance you'd want someone to give Emma if she were the one being held." Victoria met his eyes. "And I'm promising that if anything happens to you, I'll take care of her. Legal guardianship, education, everything. Emma will never want for anything. She'll want her father." "Then come back." Victoria's voice softened. "Come back and let me help you build the life you're trying to give her. My company has resources. I can make sure Emma has opportunities, security, a future that doesn't depend on how many transmissions you can fix in a week." Caleb laughed, bitter and tired. "You're trying to buy me. I'm trying to give you a reason to survive because right now you're looking at this like a one-way trip, like you've already accepted you won't come back. But Emma needs you to fight for more than just my brother. She needs you to fight to come home." The words hit harder than Victoria had intended. She saw it in the way Caleb's shoulders tightened, the way his breathing changed. "I made my wife a promise," he said quietly, "that I'd keep Emma safe, that I'd be there for her. How do I break that promise and still call myself her father?" "You don't. You extend the promise. You teach her that safety isn't just about avoiding danger. It's about fighting for the people who can't fight for themselves. You show her what her uncle was willing to die for, and you trust that the skills that kept you alive through hell will keep you alive long enough to come home to her." Caleb turned away, walked to the window. Outside, Silver Ridge was waking up. Shop owners opening their doors, early morning joggers heading up the mountain trails, the same peaceful routine that had defined his life for 3 years. "I'll need 3 days to prepare," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was committing to. "I need to make arrangements for Emma, set up care plans in case I don't come back. And I need equipment, the kind of equipment that isn't available at the local sporting goods store." Victoria felt relief and terror in equal measure. "I can get you anything you need. Name it. Tactical gear, night vision, comms equipment that can't be traced. Weapons, specific models I'm familiar with. Medical supplies for emergency field treatment, and a secure vehicle that can handle rough terrain and won't show up on any manifests." "Done. I'll have it delivered within 48 hours. "Not here. There's an old mining road 15 miles north of town. Abandoned equipment yard. Meet me there Thursday night, 10 p.m. Caleb, and I need your word on something else." He turned to face her, and his expression was harder than she'd seen it. "If I confirm Marcus is there and I can't extract him, you let it go. You don't send anyone else. You don't launch some half-assed rescue attempt that gets more people killed. You let him rest and you move on with your life. Deal?" Victoria wanted to argue, to insist that she'd never stop fighting, but she recognized the look in his eyes. He needed this boundary, this limit to what he was being asked to sacrifice. "Deal," she said. Caleb nodded once, then headed for the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. "Marcus talked about you sometimes, on long deployments when we'd sit around comparing horror stories about family. He said you were the smartest person he knew. Said you could negotiate deals that left the other side thinking they'd won when really you'd taken them for everything. Said you were ruthless when you needed to be, but fair when you could afford it." He said that? "He also said you were lonely, that you'd built this empire but forgotten to build a life, that success had cost you everything personal, and he worried you'd wake up one day and realize there was no one left to share it with." Caleb met her eyes. "Don't let this mission become another thing you sacrifice yourself for. Win or lose, you need to figure out what you're living for, not just what you're fighting against." Then he was gone, leaving Victoria alone with her files and her guilt and the growing certainty that she'd just set in motion something that would either save them all or destroy what was left of the lives they'd built from the wreckage. Emma noticed the change immediately. "Daddy, you're acting weird," she announced at breakfast, her spoon suspended halfway to her mouth, milk dripping back into her cereal bowl. Caleb looked up from the coffee he'd been staring at without drinking. "Weird how?" "Quiet, weird. You keep looking at me like you're memorizing what I look like. Too perceptive, just like her mother." "I'm just thinking, sweetheart." "About what?" "About how lucky I am to have you." Emma rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair only a 7-year-old could muster. "That's definitely weird. Are you sick? Do you have a fever? Mrs. Patterson says when adults act strange, it's usually because they're coming down with something." "I'm not sick, I promise." Caleb reached across the table, brushed a drop of milk from her chin. "But I do need to talk to you about something important." Emma's expression shifted, became serious in that way children do when they sense the world is about to tilt. "Okay. You remember Miss Hayes from the Café? The maybe princess lady?" "Right. Well, she's asked me to help her with something, a job. It's going to take me away for a little while, maybe a week, maybe less." Emma's spoon clattered into her bowl. "Away where?" "I can't tell you exactly, but it's important. Someone needs help, and I'm one of the few people who can provide it. So go help them and come back tomorrow." "It's not that simple, Em. This is the kind of help that takes time, and it might be dangerous." The tears started immediately, hot and furious. "No, you promised. You promised after Mommy died that you wouldn't leave me." "I promised I'd always come back. That's different." "It's not different." Emma was out of her chair now, her small fists clenched. "You're leaving just like Mommy left, and you're not coming back, and I'll be all alone, and—" Caleb caught her as she launched herself at him, her sobs muffled against his chest. He held her tight, feeling his heart crack with every shuddering breath she took. "Listen to me, baby. Listen." He waited until her crying quieted to hiccups. "I'm coming back. I swear on everything I am, I'm coming back to you. But I need to do this because it's the right thing to do. Someone's family needs them home, just like you need me home. And if I can help make that happen, I have to try." "Why? Why does it have to be you?" "Because I'm good at this kind of help. And because I owe it to someone who is very important to me. Someone who made sure I could come home to you when things were bad. Now I need to help his family the same way." Emma pulled back, her face blotchy and wet. "What if you get hurt?" "I'll be careful." "What if careful isn't enough?" Caleb didn't have an answer for that, so he told her the truth. "Then you'll go stay with Miss Hayes and she'll take care of you. She's already promised. You'll have a good life, Emma, a safe life, better than anything I could give you here." "I don't want a better life. I want you." "I know, sweetheart. I know. And I want you too. Which is why I'm going to fight like hell to come back. But I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that? Can you be brave while I'm gone?" Emma wiped her nose on her sleeve, a habit Caleb had given up trying to break. "How long?" "A week, maybe less if everything goes according to plan." "And you'll call me?" "If I can. But if I can't, it doesn't mean something's wrong. It just means I'm working, okay?" She nodded, but the fear in her eyes didn't diminish. "I have a bad feeling about this, Daddy." "That's just because it's scary. Change is always scary. But sometimes we have to do scary things because they're right." Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then, the person you're helping, are they good? Like you? Yes, very good. A hero, actually. Then I guess heroes have to help other heroes. She said it grudgingly, like she was negotiating terms she didn't like but understood were necessary. But you have to promise on Mommy's memory that you'll come back. It was the heaviest promise Emma knew how to ask for. The one that meant everything. I promise on Mommy's memory, Caleb said, praying he could keep it. Martha Patterson arrived that afternoon with casseroles and concern. Caleb Ward, what foolishness are you planning? She demanded, setting down enough food to feed Emma for a month. That Hayes woman's been asking questions all over town, and now you're suddenly arranging for Emma to stay with me for a week? What's going on? Caleb had known this conversation was coming. Martha had become something like family in the 3 years he'd lived in Silver Ridge. The grandmother Emma had never known, the safety net he desperately needed while figuring out single parenthood. I'm helping her with something, a job. It's going to take me out of town for a few days. What kind of job? The kind I used to do, before. Martha's expression shifted from concern to understanding. She'd never pushed for details about his past, but she wasn't stupid. She'd seen the scars, noticed the way he moved, recognized the signs of someone carrying old wounds. Is it dangerous? Probably. Is it necessary? I think so, yeah. Martha sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of her 63 years. You've built a good life here, Caleb, a quiet life. Emma's happy. You're happy. Why would you risk all that? Because someone I served with needs help, and because if I don't do this, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have made a difference. And if you don't come back, what happens to Emma then? Victoria Hayes has committed to legal guardianship, financial support. Emma will be taken care of. That's not the same as having her father. I know. Caleb sat down across from her, his voice gentle. Martha, I need you to understand something. The man I was before, the soldier, the operator, that's not who I am anymore. I walked away from that life because I wanted to be Emma's father more than I wanted to be anything else. And that hasn't changed. But this isn't about going back to who I was. It's about using what I learned to help someone who needs it, and then coming home. You sound very certain you'll survive. I'm certain I'll fight like hell to survive. That's all any of us can promise. Martha reached across the table, covered his scarred hand with her weathered one. That little girl loves you more than life itself. Don't you dare make her live through another loss. You hear me? Don't you dare. Yes, ma'am. And when you get back, because I'm choosing to believe you will get back, you're going to sit down and have a real conversation with me about what the hell happened in your past that you're still trying to atone for. Deal. Martha stood, smoothed her apron with hands that trembled slightly. Emma can stay with me starting Thursday. But Caleb, if you're not back in a week, I'm coming after you myself. And I guarantee I'm meaner than whatever you're facing out there. Despite everything, Caleb smiled. I don't doubt it for a second. Well, Thursday night came too quickly. Caleb drove the familiar mountain roads in darkness, his truck loaded with gear he'd assembled over the past 3 days. Personal items mostly, clothing, basic equipment, the kind of things that wouldn't raise questions at a sporting goods store. The serious hardware would come from Victoria. The abandoned mining yard sat at the end of a rutted access road that hadn't seen regular use in years. Caleb pulled in, killed the engine, and waited. His night vision had already adjusted to the darkness, cataloging the rusted equipment, the collapsed storage shed, the perfect isolation of the location. Headlights appeared 15 minutes later. A black SUV, windows tinted, license plates obscured. It parked 30 feet away and Victoria emerged, dressed in tactical pants and a dark jacket that suggested she'd been paying attention to the seriousness of what they were planning. You came, she said. I said I would. I wasn't sure you'd go through with it. Thought you might change your mind after thinking it over. I did change my mind about 14 times, but here we are. Victoria opened the SUV's rear hatch, revealing a carefully organized arsenal. Night vision goggles, tactical vest with plate inserts, communications equipment, medical kit with serious trauma supplies, and weapons. A suppressed pistol, a compact rifle, enough ammunition for a small war. Caleb examined each item with professional efficiency, checking serial numbers, testing mechanisms, ensuring everything met his standards. This is good gear, better than good. Where'd you source it? I still have contacts, people who remember that Hayes defense systems used to equip the best. They were willing to help when I explained what it was for. You told them about Marcus? I told them about a recovery operation for a fallen soldier. They didn't ask for details. Caleb loaded the equipment into his truck, moving with the practiced economy of motion that came from years of mission prep. When he finished, he turned to find Victoria watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? I'm trying to figure out if you're brave or insane. Can it be both? Probably is. She pulled an envelope from her jacket. Satellite images updated as of this morning. Guard rotation schedules from an informant I've been cultivating. And a letter for Emma, in case I don't come back. Yes. Caleb took the envelope but didn't open it. If I don't come back and Marcus is there, you promise you'll get him out eventually? Find another way? I promise I'll try. But Caleb, you need to come back. Not just for Emma, for yourself. You've spent 3 years running from who you were. This mission, it's not about going back, it's about integrating. Taking what you learned, using it for good, and then coming home to your daughter with a clearer conscience. You sound like a therapist. I sound like someone who spent 3 years in therapy trying to process grief and guilt. It helps. Sometimes. She pulled out a satellite phone. This is encrypted, untraceable. Once you're in position, send me a signal. 1 click for I'm in. 2 clicks for target confirmed. 3 clicks for abort. And if you don't hear anything, then I wait 48 hours and assume the worst. Caleb pocketed the phone. Victoria, why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's just about Marcus. There's something else. She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. My father built Hayes Defense Systems from nothing, made it into one of the most successful contractors in the country. And when he died, he left it to me with one instruction: use it to protect people, not to make weapons, not to fuel conflicts, to protect. But you did make weapons. The division heads convinced me it was protection, that better targeting meant fewer civilian casualties, that precision meant safety. I believed them because I wanted to believe that my company was still doing what my father intended. Victoria's voice went hard. Operation Sandstone proved I was wrong, proved that I'd let the company become everything my father feared. And it cost your team their lives, cost Marcus his freedom, cost you 3 years of guilt, and Emma 3 years without knowing why her father woke up screaming. So this is penance. This is trying to be the person my father thought I could be, the person Marcus believed I was. She met his eyes. I can't undo what happened, can't bring back the soldiers who died, but I can try to bring home the one who might still be alive. And I can make sure that the man willing to risk everything to save him has a reason to come back. Caleb understood then. This wasn't just about Marcus. It was about all of them, the broken pieces trying to reassemble themselves into something whole. I'll do my best, he said simply. Your best kept you alive through worse than this. It'll be enough. She extended her hand. Caleb shook it, feeling the strength in her grip, the determination that had probably terrified boardrooms and won contracts worth billions. Take care of Emma if I don't make it back, he said. Come back and take care of her yourself. Then she was gone, the SUV's taillights disappearing down the mountain road, leaving Caleb alone with his gear and his ghosts, and a mission that would either save them all or confirm that some wounds never heal. He drove back to town slowly, running through mental checklists, reviewing intelligence, preparing himself for what came next. The shop was dark when he arrived. Martha had already picked up Emma, taken her home with promises of movie marathons and homemade cookies and all the distraction a 7-year-old could handle. The apartment felt too quiet without her. Caleb spent the night organizing his gear, writing letters he hoped Emma would never read, and trying to memorize the satellite images until he could navigate the compound in his sleep. At dawn, he locked up the shop, left a note for his regular customers explaining he'd be gone for a week, and loaded his truck with everything he'd need. His phone buzzed. A text from Martha. She's asking when you're coming home. I told her soon. Don't make me a liar. Caleb typed back, I won't, promise. Another text, this one from Victoria. Plane leaves in 3 hours. Private airfield outside Denver. I'll meet you there with final intel. This was it, the point of no return. Caleb took one last look at Silver Ridge, the mountains rising sharp against the morning sky, The town still sleeping, peaceful and safe, and everything he'd built his new life around. Then he got in his truck and drove toward a future that held either redemption or ruin, praying he'd chosen wisely, and that the skills that had kept him alive through hell would be enough to bring him home to the daughter who needed him more than anyone had ever needed anything. The road stretched ahead, empty and uncertain, just like the mission that waited at the end of it. But Caleb had made his choice. Now he just had to survive it. The private airfield sat on the outskirts of Denver, a collection of hangars and runways used by corporations and wealthy individuals who valued discretion over convenience. Victoria was waiting beside a sleek jet when Caleb arrived, her expression tense with the kind of controlled anxiety that came from sending someone into danger. "Everything's ready," she said, gesturing toward the plane. "Flight plan filed under a shell company. Pilot's former military, knows how to keep his mouth shut. You'll land at a private strip about 60 miles from the border. From there, you're on your own." Caleb shouldered his pack, feeling the familiar weight of mission gear settle against his spine. "Ground transport?" "Motorcycle, but fast, maneuverable, is easy to ditch if things go sideways. It's already waiting at the airstrip." Victoria handed him a thick folder. "Updated intelligence. My informant confirmed unusual activity at the compound yesterday. Medical supplies delivered. Armed guards doubled on the north perimeter. They're expecting trouble? Or protecting something valuable?" Her voice carried a thread of desperate hope. "It could be him, Caleb. It could really be Marcus. Or it could be a dozen other things. Arms shipment, visiting dignitary, routine security upgrade." Caleb flipped through the folder, his trained eye picking apart the new satellite images. "You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this is a dead end. I've spent 3 years preparing for dead ends. Just promise me you'll be sure before you leave. Promise me you'll verify." "I'll verify." He closed the folder, met her eyes. "And Victoria, if it goes bad, if I don't make it out, you need to let this go. Don't send anyone else. Don't throw more lives at a ghost. We already had this conversation." "I know, but I need to hear you say it again. Need to know that Emma won't grow up watching you destroy yourself trying to fix something that can't be fixed." Victoria's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "If you don't make it back, I'll let it go. I'll focus on taking care of Emma and making sure your sacrifice meant something. But Caleb, you're going to make it back. You have to." The pilot appeared in the plane's doorway, gave a subtle signal that they were ready for departure. Caleb started toward the stairs, then paused. "Tell me something about Marcus, something good. Something from before everything went to hell." Victoria blinked, surprised by the request. "He used to sing. Terribly, off-key, didn't care who heard. He'd wake up on Saturday mornings and make pancakes while belting out classic rock like he was performing at Madison Square Garden. Drove our neighbors crazy. Made me laugh so hard I couldn't breathe. He never sang in the field. I didn't know he was musical. He wasn't. That was the point. He said life was too short to only do things you're good at. That joy mattered more than skill." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'd give anything to hear him murder another Eagles song." Caleb smiled despite the weight pressing on his chest. "Then let's try to get him home so you can." He boarded the plane without looking back, knowing that if he hesitated, if he let himself think too hard about Emma's tearful goodbye or Martha's warning or the very real possibility that he was flying toward his own death, he'd lose his nerve entirely. The jet's interior was luxurious in the way only serious money could buy. Leather seats, polished wood trim, enough legroom to stretch out comfortably. Caleb ignored it all, spreading his gear across the floor and conducting a final equipment check. Night vision tested and calibrated. Weapons cleaned and loaded. Communications equipment confirmed operational. Medical supplies inventoried and accessible. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "We'll be wheels up in 5. Flight time approximately 4 hours. There's food and drinks in the galley if you need anything." Caleb wasn't hungry, but he forced himself to eat anyway. Protein bars and water. The kind of functional nutrition that would keep him sharp through whatever came next. He spent the flight reviewing the compound's layout, memorizing guard positions, planning approach routes, and extraction paths. 3 years away from operational planning, but the skills came back with disturbing ease. Muscle memory of the mind, automatic and unavoidable. Somewhere over the Rockies, his satellite phone buzzed. A text from Martha. "Emma wants to know if you're safe. What should I tell her?" Caleb stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, "Tell her I'm being careful. Tell her I love her. Tell her I'll call when I can." The response came immediately. "She made you a drawing. A knight fighting dragons. She says the knight always wins because he has to get home to his princess." Caleb closed his eyes, let himself feel the weight of that responsibility. Emma believed in happy endings. Believed heroes always came home. He wouldn't be the one to teach her that sometimes the dragon wins. The plane began its descent as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. They landed on a strip of cracked concrete in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by scrub brush and the kind of desolate terrain that made excellent cover for activities people wanted to keep hidden. The motorcycle was exactly where Victoria had promised, a dirt bike modified for both speed and stealth, matte black paint job that would disappear in darkness. Caleb strapped his gear to the frame, tested the engine, and reviewed the route one final time. 60 miles to the border, another 40 to the compound. If he pushed hard and encountered no obstacles, he could be in position by dawn. The plan was to observe during daylight, map actual guard patterns against the intelligence reports, and make entry after dark tomorrow. Assuming nothing went wrong, Caleb kick-started the bike, felt the engine's reassuring rumble beneath him, and headed into the gathering darkness. The terrain was brutal, rocky hills, dried riverbeds, patches of loose sand that threatened to send the bike sliding out from under him. He navigated by starlight and instinct, following coordinates Victoria had programmed into a military-grade GPS unit. The border crossing happened at midnight, through a gap in the fence that smugglers had been using for years. No guards, no surveillance, just empty desert and the knowledge that he was now operating in territory where American law couldn't protect him. Caleb pushed on, his body settling into the rhythm of long-distance riding, his mind cycling through contingencies and backup plans. What if Marcus wasn't there? What if he was, but couldn't be moved? What if the intelligence was a setup and Caleb was riding into an ambush designed to capture another American operator? He forced the thoughts aside, focused on the immediate task. Navigate, survive, verify. Everything else was noise. Dawn found him 10 miles from the compound, hidden in a rocky outcropping that provided excellent visibility and decent cover. Caleb camouflaged the bike, set up a minimal camp, and pulled out his binoculars to survey the target. The compound sat in a valley, protected by natural terrain on 3 sides and a high wall on the 4th. Guard towers at each corner. Main gate reinforced steel. The structure itself was a mix of old stone construction and newer additions. Victoria's floor plans would be partially accurate at best. Caleb counted guards during the morning rotation. 15 visible personnel, all armed with automatic weapons. Professional bearing, organized patrols, disciplined spacing. These weren't amateur militia. They were trained soldiers working for someone who valued security. He spent the day observing patterns, timing rotations, identifying weak points. The north wall, the one backing up to the ravine, had the least coverage. Guards passed by every 40 minutes, but there was a 7-minute gap when that section was unwatched. Enough time to scale the wall if you were fast and quiet. The medical delivery Victoria had mentioned came at noon. A van, 2 guards escorting a man in civilian clothes carrying equipment into the high-security wing. They emerged 30 minutes later, the civilian looking shaken in a way that suggested he'd seen something disturbing. Caleb's pulse quickened. High-security wing. Medical attention. Someone important enough to keep alive, but controlled enough to need guards present during treatment. It could be Marcus. Or it could be a dozen other scenarios his imagination didn't want to consider. As sunset approached, Caleb sent the first signal. 1 click on the satellite phone. "I'm in position." Victoria's response came within seconds. 2 clicks. Acknowledged. Waiting. Caleb ate a cold meal, protein bars and electrolyte powder mixed with water, and began his final preparations. He darkened his face with camouflage paint, checked his weapons one last time, and waited for full darkness to settle over the valley. The infiltration began at 10 p.m. Caleb moved through the ravine like a ghost, his night vision goggles turning the darkness into shades of green clarity. The climb up the north wall took 4 of his 7-minute window, his fingers finding purchase on stone that crumbled and shifted under his weight. He went over the top in near silence, dropping into a crouch on the other side. The compound's interior courtyard was exactly as the old floor plans had indicated, Open space, storage buildings on the east side, main structure to the west. But there was new construction too, a reinforced section that hadn't existed when the satellite images were taken. The high security wing. Caleb moved along the shadows, timing his progress to the guard patrols. 30 seconds to cross the courtyard, 2 minutes to reach the west wall, another minute to find an access point, a service door that should have been locked but showed signs of forced entry from previous breaches. Inside, the building was dimly lit by emergency lighting. Caleb removed his night vision, let his eyes adjust, and began moving through corridors that smelled of disinfectant and something else. Something familiar that made his stomach tighten. Fear. The compound reeked of it. He passed occupied cells, prisoners held for ransom or leverage, faces he didn't recognize, people who'd learned to stay silent when footsteps approached. None of them were Marcus. The high-security wing was at the end of a long corridor, protected by a locked door, and 2 guards who sat playing cards, their weapons leaning against the wall, just out of immediate reach. Caleb watched them for 10 minutes, learning their patterns. They changed position every few hands, argued about the rules, were distracted enough that a fast, quiet approach might work, or might get him killed. He was weighing options when one of the guards stood, stretched, and announced he needed to use the bathroom. The other guard waved him off without looking up from his cards. Caleb moved. 3 seconds to cross the distance. The remaining guard looked up just as Caleb's hand clamped over his mouth, his other arm applying pressure to the carotid artery in a chokehold that cut off blood flow to the brain. The guard struggled, tried to reach for his weapon, but Caleb held firm until the man went limp. Not dead, just unconscious. Caleb zip-tied his wrists and ankles, gagged him with tape, and dragged him into a supply closet. The second guard would be back in minutes. He had to move fast. The high-security wing door required a key card. Caleb found one on the unconscious guard, swiped it, and slipped inside as the lock clicked open. The corridor beyond was pristine. Newly painted walls, medical equipment visible through observation windows. The kind of setup that suggested someone was being kept alive but not kept comfortable. 3 cells. 2 empty. 1 occupied. Caleb approached the occupied cell, his heart hammering against his ribs, and looked through the reinforced glass. The man inside was barely recognizable as human, emaciated, scarred, hair grown long and matted. He sat on a narrow cot, staring at nothing, his hands showing signs of old injuries that had healed badly. But the profile was right. The bone structure, the way he held his shoulders despite obvious pain. Caleb pulled out a photograph Victoria had given him. Marcus Hayes 3 years ago, healthy and strong and alive. He compared it to the broken man in the cell. Same jawline, same nose, broken and reset at some point. Same eyes, though now empty of everything except exhausted endurance. Caleb sent the signal. 2 clicks. Target confirmed. Then he opened the cell door. The man inside didn't react immediately, as if visitors were so rare that his brain couldn't process the intrusion. When he finally looked up, his eyes focused slowly on Caleb's face. Marcus Hayes? Caleb kept his voice low, barely above a whisper. No response. Captain Hayes, I'm here to get you out. Your sister sent me. Something flickered in those empty eyes. Victoria? His voice was ruined, raw and broken, as if screaming had become his primary means of communication. But it was conscious, aware. Yes, Victoria's waiting, but we need to move. Can you walk? Marcus tried to stand, made it halfway up before his legs buckled. Caleb caught him, felt nothing but bone and damaged tissue beneath the prison clothes. I can't. Haven't walked more than 10 feet in months. They keep me controlled. Caleb saw the shackle scars on Marcus's ankles, the way his muscles had atrophied from disuse. Extraction had just become exponentially more complicated. I'm going to carry you. It won't be comfortable, but we're leaving. Tonight. Right now. You're one of mine. Marcus's ruined voice carried a note of recognition. I know you. Caleb. Ward? Wardell. I dropped part of the name, but yes, same team, same mission that put you here. You survived. So did you. And now we're both getting out. Caleb got Marcus's arm over his shoulder, took most of his weight, and started back toward the corridor. They made it 5 feet before alarms started blaring. The second guard must have returned, found his partner unconscious, and sounded the alert. Change of plans, Caleb muttered, pulling his weapon as shouts echoed through the compound. We're going out the hard way. He'd planned for stealth, for careful extraction with minimal contact. But plans changed and operators adapted. Caleb kicked open the nearest door, found himself in a medical supply room. Not ideal for defense, but better than an open corridor. He settled Marcus on the floor behind a steel cabinet, checked his ammunition, and prepared for the fight he'd hoped to avoid. The first guard came through the door, expecting an easy target. Caleb put 2 suppressed rounds in his chest before he could raise his weapon. The body dropped, blocking the doorway. More shouts, more footsteps. The entire compound was mobilizing. Caleb pulled out the satellite phone, sent 3 clicks. Abort signal. Then he texted Victoria. Found him. Compromised. Fighting out. If I don't make contact in 12 hours, assume failed. No time to wait for a response. Guards were stacking outside the door, preparing for entry. Caleb grabbed a medical table, braced it against the door, and looked around for anything that could help. Marcus was trying to stand again, his face twisted with determination and pain. Give me a weapon. I can still fight. You can barely stand. Then prop me up and give me a weapon. I'm not leaving here on my back. Caleb recognized that tone, the same stubborn refusal to quit that had defined Marcus as a commander. He handed over his backup pistol, helped Marcus into a position where he could brace against the wall. Don't shoot me by accident, Caleb said. Don't get in my way. The door exploded inward, the medical table splintering under a sustained burst of automatic fire. Guards poured through the opening, and Caleb met them with controlled aggression. 2 shots, center mass, move to next target. His training was automatic, his body moving through muscle memory that 3 years hadn't erased. Beside him, Marcus fired with shaking hands, his shots wild but effective enough to keep guards from advancing. Empty magazines clattered on the floor. Caleb reloaded without thinking, his focus narrowed to the immediate threat. 4 guards down, 5, 6. Then the firing stopped. A voice called out in accented English, "American, you are surrounded. There is no escape. Surrender and we will make your death quick." Caleb didn't bother responding. He was calculating angles, counting remaining ammunition, trying to figure out how to move Marcus through a compound that was now fully alert and hunting them. Marcus touched his arm. "Leave me. Get out. Tell Victoria I held on as long as I could." "Not happening." "Caleb, I'm dead weight. You can't fight and carry me. Do the math." "I didn't come here to watch you die. I came here to bring you home." Caleb spotted a window, small, reinforced, but facing the ravine side of the compound. "Can you handle a 20-foot drop?" "In my condition, it'll probably kill me." "Better than definitely dying here." Marcus managed a ghost of a smile. "You always were an optimist." Caleb fired 3 rounds through the window, shattering the reinforced glass. Return fire punched through the walls, and he used the covering chaos to get Marcus to the window. On 3. 1, 2. He shoved Marcus through the window, heard him cry out as he fell, then followed without hesitation. The drop was brutal. His knees absorbed the impact, but the force still rattled through his spine. Marcus had landed badly, his left arm bent at an unnatural angle, but he was conscious, moving, alive. Caleb got him upright, ignoring the screaming in his own legs, and started running. Behind them, guards were mobilizing, searchlights sweeping the ravine. They had maybe 2 minutes before the pursuit caught up. The motorcycle was a mile away through terrain that would challenge a healthy person. With Marcus barely able to walk, it might as well have been on the moon. But Caleb had learned one thing in all his years of combat. Impossible just meant it hadn't been done yet. He half-carried, half-dragged Marcus through the ravine, his lungs burning, his muscles screaming protest. Behind them, shouts and gunfire echoed off the rocks. A bullet whined past his head, close enough to feel the displaced air. Marcus stumbled, went down. Caleb hauled him back up. "Leave me," Marcus gasped. "Please, save yourself. Shut up and move." "That's an order, soldier. You're not my commander anymore, and I'm not leaving you." They reached the motorcycle just as searchlights found their position. Caleb shoved Marcus onto the seat, kick-started the engine, and gunned the throttle as bullets sparked off the rocks around them. The bike fishtailed in loose sand, found traction, and launched forward. Caleb drove one-handed, his other arm keeping Marcus from falling off, navigating by instinct and memory through darkness that wanted to kill them. Behind them, vehicle engines roared to life. The pursuit was coming. Caleb pushed the bike harder, ignoring the protests from the engine, the way Marcus's weight made every turn dangerous. 10 miles to the border. 10 miles with armed men hunting them, and Marcus barely conscious. The satellite phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Victoria. Helicopter on standby at border crossing. Signal when close. Caleb keyed in a response one-handed. 5 minutes. Be ready, Yimmy. The chase continued through brutal terrain, bullets whining past, searchlights trying to pin them down. Marcus's grip was weakening, his body sagging against Caleb's back. They weren't going to make it. The math didn't work. Then Caleb saw it. The gap in the border fence lit up by a spotlight that shouldn't be there. The helicopter dropped from the sky like salvation, its rotors kicking up dust. A side door opening to reveal armed security personnel providing covering fire. Caleb aimed the motorcycle straight at the opening, drove through at full speed, and killed the engine as the helicopter's crew dragged them aboard. Marcus was pulled in first, medics already working on him. Then Caleb, his body finally registering the damage. Bullet graze across his ribs, twisted ankle, hands torn from the motorcycle's grips. The helicopter lifted off as pursuing vehicles reached the border, their occupants firing uselessly at a target already out of range. Caleb collapsed against the bulkhead, his chest heaving, adrenaline giving way to exhaustion. Across from him, medics were stabilizing Marcus, their voices calm and professional as they cataloged injuries and started IVs. Marcus's eyes found Caleb through the chaos. He mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Caleb nodded, too tired to speak, and let his eyes close. They'd done it. Against every odd, every obstacle, every voice that said it was impossible, they'd brought Marcus Hayes home. Now, they just had to survive long enough to deliver him. The helicopter landed at a private medical facility outside Denver 90 minutes later, touching down on a rooftop helipad where Victoria stood waiting with a team of doctors she'd assembled from contacts who understood the value of discretion. Caleb watched through bleary eyes as they rushed Marcus inside on a gurney, Victoria running alongside, her hand gripping her brother's as if letting go might make him disappear again. A medic tried to guide Caleb toward a wheelchair, but he waved her off. "I can walk." "Sir, you're bleeding from at least 3 places, and your ankle is the size of a grapefruit." "I've had worse." He limped after Marcus's gurney, refusing to let the man out of his sight until they were behind secured doors. 3 years of guilt had carried him through this mission, and he wouldn't consider it complete until Marcus was stabilized and safe. The medical team swept Marcus into surgery immediately. 3 years of captivity had left him with malnutrition, multiple bone fractures that had healed incorrectly, signs of systematic torture, and infections that required aggressive intervention. Victoria stood outside the operating room, her face pressed against the observation window, tears streaming down her cheeks. Caleb lowered himself into a chair nearby, his body finally acknowledging the abuse he'd put it through. A nurse appeared with antiseptic and bandages, working on his wounds with efficient gentleness while he watched Victoria watch her brother. "You kept your promise," Victoria said without turning from the window. Her voice was thick with emotion barely controlled. "You brought him home. He's not out of the woods yet. But he's here. He's alive. That's more than I had this morning." She finally turned to face him, and Caleb saw the weight of 3 years lifting from her shoulders in real time. "The doctors say he'll survive. It'll take months of recovery, maybe years of therapy, but he'll survive." "That's good." Caleb winced as the nurse cleaned a deep graze along his ribs. "That's really good." Victoria crossed the hallway, knelt in front of his chair despite her expensive suit and the blood staining the floor. "You could have died. You nearly did die. And you did it for someone you haven't seen in 3 years, for a mission that wasn't yours to complete. Why?" Caleb thought about Emma's drawing of the knight who always won, about Marcus's letter tucked in his safe back home, about the weight of leaving someone behind and the impossibility of moving forward while carrying that burden. "Because I owed him," he said simply, "and because some debts can only be paid by showing up when it matters most." Victoria's hand found his, squeezed gently. "You're a good man, Caleb Ward, better than you give yourself credit for." "I'm a man who did what needed doing, that's all." The surgery lasted 6 hours. Caleb dozed in the chair, waking periodically when nurses came to check his bandages or when his body reminded him that adrenaline only delayed pain. It didn't prevent it. Victoria never left her post at the window, watching the surgical team work with the kind of intense focus she probably brought to board meetings and contract negotiations. Dawn was breaking over Denver when the lead surgeon emerged, pulling off his mask with the expression of someone who'd fought a battle and won. "He's stable," the doctor said, and Victoria actually swayed with relief. "We've addressed the immediate concerns, reset the fractures, treated the infections, started him on IV nutrition. He's sedated now and will be for at least 24 hours while his body begins to heal. After that, we'll assess neurological function and begin planning long-term rehabilitation." "Can I see him?" Victoria's voice was small, tentative, in a way Caleb had never heard from her. "Brief visits only. He needs rest more than anything right now." They followed the doctor into a recovery room where Marcus lay surrounded by monitors and IV lines, looking impossibly fragile against the white sheets. The man Caleb remembered had been built like a linebacker, all muscle and confidence and controlled power. This version was a shadow, hollowed out by suffering but still unmistakably alive. Victoria approached the bed carefully, as if sudden movements might shatter the moment's reality. She took Marcus's hand, the one not wrapped in bandages, and bent close to his ear. "I've got you," she whispered. "You're safe now. You're home." Marcus's eyes remained closed, his breathing steady with medication, but his fingers twitched against hers. Some part of him heard. Some part knew. Caleb watched from the doorway, feeling his own eyes burn with exhaustion and emotion he didn't have words for. The mission was complete. Marcus was home. The debt was paid. Now he just needed to get back to his own life. Back to Emma. He pulled out his phone, saw 17 missed calls from Martha, and twice as many texts. The most recent read, "Emma knows something's wrong. She's been crying for an hour. Please tell me you're alive." Caleb stepped into the hallway, dialed Martha's number. She answered before the first ring finished. "Caleb Ward, if you're calling from beyond the grave, I swear I'm alive, Martha. Banged up, but alive." Her sob of relief came through clearly. "That child has been beside herself, absolutely convinced something terrible happened to you." "Where are you?" "Denver. Medical facility. The mission went hard, but we succeeded. I'm coming home." "When?" "Soon as I can arrange transport. Maybe tomorrow if—" "Today, Caleb. You get home today. That little girl needs to see you're alive, or she's going to make herself sick with worry." He heard Emma's voice in the background, high and frantic. "Is that Daddy? Is he okay? Let me talk to him." "Put her on," Caleb said, his throat tight. There was fumbling, then Emma's voice filled his ear, wobbly with tears. "Daddy?" "Hey, sweetheart, I'm here. You promised you'd call. You promised and you didn't, and I thought the dragons got you, and the dragons didn't get me. I'm fine, just a little tired. You don't sound fine, you sound hurt." Too perceptive, always too perceptive. "I'm a little hurt," he admitted, "but nothing serious, nothing that won't heal." "And Em? I'm coming home today. I'll be there before bedtime." "You promise?" "On your mom's memory, I promise." He heard her breathing steady, heard her processing the weight of that oath. "Did you save the other hero? The one who needed help?" "Yeah, baby, I saved him. He's going to be okay." "Good." Emma's voice was fierce now, proud. "That's what heroes do. They save people and come home. That's exactly what they do." He talked to her for another 10 minutes, listening to her describe the movies she'd watched with Martha, and the cookies they'd baked, and the new drawing she'd made of the castle, with the knight returning victorious. Normal childhood things that felt impossibly precious after 48 hours of violence and chaos. When he finally ended the call, Victoria was standing in the hallway waiting for him. "You're leaving," she said, not a question. "Emma needs me. I need to see her, hold her, prove I kept my promise." "I understand, but Caleb, we need to talk about what happens next. For you, for Emma, for all of us." "Later. Right now I just need to get home." Victoria pulled out her phone, made a call. "I'm sending the jet. It'll be fueled and ready within the hour. And Caleb, take whatever time you need with Emma. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here." The flight back felt longer than the one out, every minute stretching as Caleb's body reminded him of the toll the mission had taken. The nurse had given him painkillers he'd refused. He needed to be clear-headed when he saw Emma, and now he was regretting that decision as every bump of turbulence sent fresh waves of pain through his ribs. But physical pain was manageable, expected. What worried him more was the psychological impact of going back into the field, of using skills he'd tried to bury, of becoming, however briefly, the person he'd sworn to leave behind. The soldier, the operator, the man who solved problems with violence when necessary. Emma deserved better than that version of him. The plane landed in Denver's private terminal at 2 in the afternoon. Victoria had arranged for a car to drive him back to Silver Ridge, complete with a driver who understood that conversation wasn't required. Caleb dozed in the back seat, waking when they hit the mountain roads that meant he was close to home. Martha's house sat on the edge of town, a comfortable 2-story with a wraparound porch and flower boxes that she tended with the same careful attention she gave everything. Caleb saw Emma before the car even stopped. She was sitting on the porch steps, her drawing pad clutched to her chest, and she launched herself toward him the second his door opened. He caught her despite the pain, held her tight despite the protests from his injured ribs, and felt something in his chest unknot for the first time in days. "You came back," Emma sobbed into his shoulder. "You really came back. I told you I would. You're hurt. I can feel the bandages. Just scratches. Nothing important." Emma pulled back, her tear-stained face fierce with 7-year-old fury. "Don't lie to me. I'm not a baby. If you're hurt, I need to know how bad." Martha appeared on the porch, her expression caught between relief and exasperation. "She's been like this all day, worried herself into being bossy." Caleb set Emma down carefully, took her hand. "Okay, here's the truth. I got banged up during the mission. Bullet grazed my ribs, twisted my ankle, got some cuts and bruises. The doctors patched me up and said I'll heal fine. It'll hurt for a few weeks, but I'm not in danger, okay?" "You got shot?" Emma's voice went small. "Grazed. Not the same thing." "But you could have been actually shot. You could have died." "But I didn't. I was careful. I was smart, and I came home to you just like I promised." Emma studied him with eyes too old for her age, processing trauma she shouldn't have to understand. Finally, she nodded. "Next time you have to save someone, can it be someone closer? Like maybe in the same state? So you don't have to go so far away?" Despite everything, Caleb laughed. "I'll see what I can do." Martha invited him inside, fed him soup and bread while Emma sat pressed against his side, as if physical contact could prevent him from disappearing again. He told them a carefully edited version of the mission, enough truth to satisfy Emma's questions, enough omission to protect her from the worst details. "So the other hero is safe now?" Emma asked. "He's safe, recovering in a hospital. His sister is taking care of him." "Is she nice? Like a princess?" "Yeah, Em, she's nice. And very grateful." "Good." Emma's grip on his arm tightened. "You did a good thing, Daddy. Even though it was scary, even though you got hurt, you did what heroes do." Martha caught his eye across the table, her expression saying everything words couldn't. He'd survived. He'd come home. And now the real work began, processing what the mission had awakened in him, figuring out how to integrate the soldier he'd been with, the father he was trying to become. But that could wait. For now, he just held his daughter and let himself be present in this moment of safety and peace. They returned to the apartment above the shop that evening, Emma chattering about everything he'd missed, school activities, progress on her drawing skills, a loose tooth that was almost ready to come out. Normal life, continuing despite his absence. It was exactly what he'd hoped for, and exactly what made him realize how fragile their situation really was. He couldn't keep living on the edge of disappearing. Couldn't build a stable life for Emma while carrying the weight of unfinished business and unresolved trauma. Something had to change. His phone buzzed after Emma went to bed. A text from Victoria. "Marcus woke up this afternoon. First thing he asked about was whether you made it home safely. Second thing was whether I'd thanked you properly. I told him I was working on it." Caleb typed back, "No thanks needed. Just glad he's recovering." The response came immediately. "We need to talk. Not about gratitude. About your future. Emma's future. I have a proposition for you. Can it wait? I just got home." Of course." "But Caleb? What you did, the courage it took, the skill you demonstrated, That's not something you should waste fixing transmissions. You're meant for more, and I'd like to help you figure out what that looks like." He stared at the message for a long time, then set the phone aside without responding. Victoria meant well, but she didn't understand. He wasn't trying to waste his skills. He was trying to bury them, trying to be someone his daughter could be proud of without qualification or fear. But even as he thought it, Caleb knew the truth. The mission had changed something, reminded him that he was capable of more than oil changes and brake repairs, that the skills he'd learned in service to his country could still serve a purpose. The question was whether that purpose could coexist with the quiet life he'd built, or if opening that door would inevitably lead back to the darkness he'd fought so hard to escape. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Caleb lay in bed listening to Emma's soft breathing through the thin wall between their rooms and felt the familiar weight of decision pressing down. Stay in Silver Ridge and continue the safe, simple existence that protected Emma from his past. Or acknowledge that Victoria was right, that he was capable of more, and maybe, just maybe, Emma deserved to see her father using his gifts instead of hiding them. His phone buzzed again, around midnight. Another text from Victoria. "I know you need space, but when you're ready, come to Denver. Bring Emma. Let me show you what I'm proposing. No pressure, just possibilities." Caleb didn't respond, but he didn't delete the message either. 3 days passed. Caleb returned to work at the shop, moving slowly through familiar tasks while his body healed. Customers welcomed him back with the casual friendliness that defined small-town life, not asking where he'd been because everyone respected privacy until you volunteered information. Martha stopped by daily with food and concern, her way of making sure he was taking care of himself while taking care of Emma. She didn't push for details about the mission, but Caleb saw the questions in her eyes every time she looked at his healing wounds. On the 4th day, Emma came home from school with a permission slip for a field trip to Denver, the science museum, overnight stay, educational experience that would cost more than Caleb usually spent in a month. "Can I go?" Emma asked, her eyes hopeful. "Please? Everyone else is going, and Mrs. Patterson says it's really educational, and of course you can go." Emma blinked, surprised by the easy agreement. "Really? You're not going to say it's too expensive or too far away or... Really, you should have experiences. See things beyond Silver Ridge." Caleb signed the permission slip, then made a decision that felt simultaneously terrifying and inevitable. "Actually, I was thinking we could both go to Denver this weekend. Make it a trip. See some things." "Like what things?" "Like maybe visiting Miss Hayes. She wanted to thank us properly for helping her brother." Emma's face lit up. "The princess lady? We're going to visit the princess lady?" "She's not actually a princess, Em. She has nice clothes and an important job, and she lives in a big city. That's basically a princess." Caleb couldn't argue with 7-year-old logic. He called Victoria that evening after putting Emma to bed. She answered on the first ring. "You're coming." "How did you know?" "Because you're smart enough to recognize an opportunity when it's offered. When can you be here?" "This weekend? Saturday morning?" "Perfect. I'll arrange accommodations. And Caleb, bring an open mind. What I'm proposing is unconventional, but I think it could work for all of us." Saturday morning arrived clear and cold, the kind of early spring day that promised winter wasn't quite finished. Caleb packed bags for both of them, double-checking that he had everything Emma might need. Her favorite stuffed animal, the drawing pad she never went anywhere without, the book she was reading about dragons and knights. The drive to Denver took 3 hours through mountain roads that gradually gave way to highway and then city sprawl. Emma pressed her face against the window the whole way, cataloging everything new and different from Silver Ridge's familiar landscape. Victoria had arranged for them to stay at a hotel downtown. Nothing ostentatious, but comfortable in a way that spoke of money spent thoughtfully rather than showily. She met them in the lobby, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater that made her look more approachable than the corporate executive Caleb had first encountered. "Emma?" Victoria said, kneeling to the girl's level. "It's so good to see you again. Thank you for sharing your dad with me for a few days. He helped me very much." Emma studied her with the serious intensity of childhood evaluation. "Did your brother come home safe?" "He did. Thanks to your dad. He's recovering in a hospital not far from here. Would you like to meet him?" Emma looked to Caleb for permission. He nodded, curious how Marcus would react to meeting the daughter of the man who'd saved his life. The hospital was private, exclusive, the kind of place that catered to people who valued discretion and could afford luxury even in medical care. Victoria led them through hallways that felt more like a hotel than a treatment facility, finally stopping outside a suite where two security guards stood watch. "He's still weak," Victoria warned. "Still healing, but he wanted to meet you both." Marcus was sitting up in bed when they entered, looking better than the last time Caleb had seen him, but still carrying visible evidence of his ordeal. His eyes found Caleb first, and something passed between them. Recognition, gratitude, shared understanding of what survival costs. Then Marcus saw Emma, and his expression softened completely. "You must be Emma," he said, his ruined voice gentler than Caleb had heard it. "Your dad told me about you, about your drawings of castles and knights." Emma moved closer, unafraid in the way children often are when they sense fundamental goodness. "Are you the other hero he saved?" "I guess I am, though your dad's the real hero. I just survived until he could find me. He's good at saving people. It's basically his superpower." Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his scarred face into something almost whole. "I'd have to agree with you there." They talked for 20 minutes, Emma telling Marcus about Silver Ridge and her school and the field trip she was going on, while Marcus listened with the kind of attention that suggested he was relearning how to engage with normal life. Victoria watched them both with barely contained emotion, seeing her brother interact with a child, seeing him have a future beyond survival. When they left, Marcus caught Caleb's hand. "Thank you doesn't cover it. You know that, right? You'd have done the same for me." "Maybe, but you actually did it. That means something." Back in the hallway, Victoria turned to Caleb. "Emma, honey, there's a playroom down the hall with games and activities. Would you like to explore while I talk to your dad about some grown-up things?" Emma looked to Caleb for permission. He nodded. "Stay where the nurses can see you." "I'm 7, not 2. I know how to be safe." But she skipped off happily, leaving the adults alone. Victoria led Caleb to a private lounge, poured them both coffee, and sat down with the kind of focused intensity that probably terrified boardrooms. "Here's what I'm proposing," she said without preamble. "You're wasting your potential in Silver Ridge. Those skills you have, tactical planning, crisis response, the ability to stay calm when everything's falling apart, they're valuable, extremely valuable, and I need them." "For what?" Hayes Defense Systems is shifting focus. We're moving away from weapons development toward security consultation, crisis response, recovery operations for people caught in situations like Marcus's, kidnapping victims, political prisoners, people who fall through the cracks of official channels. Victoria leaned forward. "I want you to head that division, build a team, design protocols, use your experience to help people who need it most." Caleb stared at her. "You want me to run rescue operations professionally? I want you to do what you're best at in a way that doesn't require you to deploy overseas or put Emma through the terror of wondering if you'll come home. Consulting, planning, training others, and yes, occasionally leading missions when the situation demands it, and you choose to accept. That's not a quiet life." "No, but it's a meaningful one, and Caleb, Emma's not going to be 7 forever. Eventually she'll ask what you did before Silver Ridge, what you're capable of. Wouldn't you rather show her that you use your gifts to help people than have her discover you're hiding them?" It was the same argument Victoria had made before, but it landed differently now. Now that he'd proven to himself that the skills were still there, that he could deploy them successfully and come home to his daughter. "I need to think about it." "Take all the time you need, but while you're thinking, let me show you something." She pulled out a tablet, brought up financial projections. "This is what the salary would be. Enough to give Emma opportunities you can't afford on a mechanic's income. Private schools, if you want them. College fund that actually makes a difference. Security for both of you that doesn't depend on whether the shop has a good month." The numbers were staggering, more than Caleb had made even in the military, enough to change everything. "And there's one more thing," Victoria continued. "I'm buying a property outside Denver, 20 acres, mountain views, enough space for horses if Emma wants them. Close enough to the city for work, but far enough for privacy. There's a guest house on the property, fully furnished, yours if you want it. No rent, part of the employment package. You're trying to buy me again. I'm trying to give you options. Stay in Silver Ridge if that's what's best for Emma. Keep fixing transmissions and building the simple life you've worked for. But Caleb, You saved my brother when no one else could. Let me return the favor. Let me help you build a life that honors everything you are, not just the parts you think are safe to show your daughter." Caleb looked through the window at Emma, who was absorbed in building something with blocks in the playroom, her face scrunched in concentration. She deserved stability, deserved a father who was present and safe, but she also deserved to see that strength could be used for good, that skills forged in darkness could serve the light. "I need to talk to Emma," he said finally. "This isn't just my decision." "Of course. And Caleb, whatever you decide, you'll always have my gratitude. And my friendship. You saved my family. That's not a debt I take lightly." They collected Emma from the playroom and spent the rest of the day exploring Denver, the Science Museum, a park with mountain views, restaurants that served food Emma had never tried. Victoria joined them, and Caleb watched her interact with his daughter with genuine warmth and interest, not the calculated charm of someone trying to manipulate a situation. That evening, after Emma fell asleep in the hotel room, Caleb stood at the window watching the city lights and trying to figure out what future he wanted to build. The safe choice was Silver Ridge. The known quantity, the life he'd carefully constructed to protect Emma from his past. But maybe protection wasn't about hiding. Maybe it was about showing her that even difficult histories could be redeemed, that strength could serve compassion, that the father who'd taught her about knights and heroes could actually be one. His phone buzzed, a text from Martha. "Emma called to tell me about the princess's brother and the giant hotel and the museum. She sounds happy." "You sound happy in the background. Maybe Denver's not such a bad idea after all." Caleb smiled despite himself. Martha had always been too perceptive for her own good. Another text, this one from Marcus. "Whatever my sister's offering, take it. You've earned it. And more importantly, Emma deserves a father who's using his gifts instead of burying them. Trust me on this." The decision crystallized in that moment, clear and certain despite its complexity. He would take the job, move to Denver, give Emma opportunities and himself a purpose beyond atonement, but he'd do it on his own terms. Part-time consulting that left room for being present. Boundaries that protected his family even while serving others. A life that integrated all his parts instead of fragmenting them into acceptable and hidden. He texted Victoria, "Let's talk details tomorrow. I'm in." Her response came immediately. "Welcome to the team. You won't regret this." Caleb looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully, her stuffed animal clutched tight, and made himself a promise. This new chapter would be different, built on honesty instead of secrecy, on using his strengths to serve others instead of hiding them to appear safe. He'd been a soldier, a father, a mechanic hiding from his past. Now he'd try being all of it at once, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The conversation with Emma happened on Sunday morning over pancakes in the hotel restaurant. Caleb had rehearsed a dozen different ways to explain the potential move, the new job, the life change that would upend everything she knew. But Emma, as always, cut straight through his careful planning. "We're moving to Denver, aren't we?" she said, pouring syrup over her pancakes with the focused concentration she brought to important tasks. Caleb blinked. "What makes you say that?" "You've been looking at me all weekend like you're trying to decide something big, and Miss Hayes keeps talking about schools and activities and places we could explore like she's trying to convince you of something. Plus, you get that face." "What face?" "The face where you're worried I'm going to be upset, but you've already decided it's the right thing to do." Emma took a bite of pancake, chewed thoughtfully. "So are we moving or not?" Sometimes Caleb forgot just how much his daughter had inherited from her mother, the ability to read people, to cut through deflection and get to truth. "Miss Hayes offered me a job," he said carefully. "A good job helping people who are in trouble. It would mean moving to Denver, changing schools for you, leaving Silver Ridge behind. But it would also mean more opportunities, more security, a chance for both of us to have a different kind of life. Would you still be fixing cars?" "No. I'd be using the skills I learned in the Army, planning missions, training people, sometimes helping with rescues like the one I did for Miss Hayes' brother." Emma set down her fork, her expression serious. "Would it be dangerous?" "Sometimes, not always, and I'd have a say in what missions I took. I could choose to stay safe when you needed me to. But you'd still be a hero, like really actually a hero, not just someone who fixes transmissions." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "I'm not a hero, Em. I'm just someone trying to do the right thing. That's literally what heroes are, Dad. She picked up her fork again, attacked her pancakes with renewed energy. I think we should move. Just like that? Well, Silver Ridge is nice, but it's kind of boring. And all my friends talk about going places and doing things, and we mostly just stay in the same town doing the same stuff. Plus, Miss Hayes seems really nice, and her brother is recovering, which means you actually saved him, and that's pretty cool. And there's that property she mentioned with the horses, and I've always wanted to learn to ride horses. You've never mentioned wanting to ride horses. Because we live above an auto shop in a town with 3,000 people. Where would I ride horses? But if there's actually horses available, then yes, I would very much like to ride horses. Caleb laughed despite the weight of the decision pressing on him. So you're okay with this? Really okay? Because once we move, it's hard to go back. Emma reached across the table, put her small hand over his scarred one. Daddy, I'm okay with anything as long as we're together. Silver Ridge or Denver or anywhere else. You came back from saving someone even though it was dangerous. That means you can do hard things and still come home to me. So yeah, let's move to Denver and do new things. And maybe I'll finally get to see what you're really good at, instead of just hearing Martha talk about how you're wasting your potential. Martha said that? She says a lot of things when she thinks I'm not listening. Mostly about how you're too good for fixing cars and how you're hiding from something. Emma squeezed his hand. But I don't think you're hiding anymore. I think you're ready to be the knight instead of just telling stories about knights. Out of the mouths of children came wisdom that adults spent years trying to find. Okay then, Caleb said, feeling the decision settle into certainty. We're moving to Denver. Emma grinned, gap-toothed and brilliant. Can I tell Miss Hayes, please? I want to see her face when she finds out we said yes. Go ahead. Emma was out of her chair and across the restaurant before Caleb could change his mind, throwing herself at Victoria with the enthusiastic tackle hug that only 7-year-olds could pull off. Victoria caught her, laughing, and met Caleb's eyes over Emma's head with a look of pure joy. This was happening. They were really doing this. The next month passed in a blur of logistics and transitions. Caleb sold the auto shop to a young mechanic who'd been looking for an opportunity to settle down, the transaction handled quickly and fairly. Martha cried when he told her, but insisted it was happiness, that she'd always known Silver Ridge was too small to hold him forever. You call me every week, she demanded, hugging him tight enough to make his still-healing ribs protest. And you bring that girl back to visit. She's got roots here even if you're planting new ones elsewhere. I promise. And Caleb, I'm proud of you, for facing your past instead of running from it, for choosing to be whole instead of safe. That takes courage most people never find. Packing up 3 years of life took less time than building it had. Caleb found himself sorting through possessions with Emma, deciding what mattered enough to keep and what could be left behind. The furniture mostly stayed, the apartment came furnished, and none of it held particular meaning. But Emma's drawings, her books, the photographs of her mother, those came with them. The physical proof that they'd lived here, grown here, survived here. Victoria arranged everything else with the kind of efficient competence that ran multinational corporations. Movers for their belongings. Enrollment at a private school near the Denver property. Introduction. Meetings with the team. Caleb would be leading experienced security professionals who'd worked crisis response and understood the weight of the missions they'd be planning. The property itself was everything Victoria had promised. 20 acres of rolling hills with mountain views, a main house that looked like something from a magazine, and a guest house that managed to be both spacious and cozy. Emma claimed her bedroom immediately, a room 3 times the size of her old one, with windows that overlooked pastures where 2 horses already grazed. You actually got horses, Emma breathed, pressing her face against the glass. I figured if we're starting a new life, we might as well do it properly, Victoria said from the doorway. Their names are Comet and Star. The stable manager says they're gentle enough for beginners, but spirited enough to keep things interesting. Emma turned, her eyes shining. Can I really learn to ride them? Lessons start next week. I'll be learning too. I always wanted to ride but never had time. Maybe we can figure it out together. Caleb watched them talk, watched his daughter connect with this woman who'd inserted herself into their lives with the force of necessity and stayed through genuine care. Victoria had every reason to focus solely on Marcus's recovery, to fulfill her obligation to Caleb and move on with her corporate empire. Instead, she was here, planning horseback riding lessons and making sure Emma's room had the right furniture and genuinely investing in their well-being. It meant something. Caleb wasn't sure exactly what yet, but it meant something. Marcus was released from the hospital 2 weeks after they moved to Denver. He still needed physical therapy, still carried visible scars from his captivity, but the doctors declared him stable enough to continue recovery at home. Victoria converted part of the main house into a rehabilitation suite, hired round-the-clock care, and threw herself into her brother's healing with the same intensity she brought to everything else. Caleb visited regularly, ostensibly to discuss the new security division, but really to check on the man whose rescue had changed everything. They'd sit on the porch overlooking the mountains, drinking coffee, and talking about everything except the mission that connected them. "You ever regret it?" Marcus asked one afternoon, his voice still rough but stronger than it had been. "Giving up the quiet life to come work for my sister?" "Sometimes," Caleb admitted. "Usually around 2 a.m. when I'm reviewing threat assessments instead of sleeping. But then I see Emma riding those horses with Victoria, laughing in a way she never did in Silver Ridge, and I think maybe this is what she needed all along, room to grow into someone bigger than her circumstances." "And what about what you needed?" "I'm still figuring that out." Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the horses move across the pasture. "I spent 3 years in that compound thinking about all the things I'd do if I ever got out, places I'd go, people I'd reconnect with, ways I'd make the time matter instead of just surviving it. And you know what I've realized? Most of those plans were about running from trauma instead of integrating it, about pretending those 3 years didn't happen instead of accepting they shaped who I am now." "That's pretty profound for a guy who spent yesterday arguing with his physical therapist about walking without assistance." Marcus laughed, the sound still unfamiliar but getting easier. "Pain makes philosophers of us all. But seriously, Caleb, you spent 3 years running too. Different circumstances, same impulse. And now you're here trying to figure out how to be the soldier and the father and the man who deserves a future. It's not easy, but it's honest. And honest is better than safe. When did you get so wise?" "Captivity gives you a lot of time to think. Too much time, honestly. I worked through every mistake I'd ever made, every relationship I'd damaged by choosing missions over people, every way I'd let fear of vulnerability keep me isolated." Marcus met Caleb's eyes. "My sister's falling for you. You know that, right?" Caleb nearly choked on his coffee. "What?" "No, she's just grateful, guilty about the mission, trying to make things right." "She's falling for you," Marcus repeated, unmoved by Caleb's denial. "I've known Victoria my whole life, watched her build walls so high nobody could reach her, convince herself that success meant sacrifice and love meant weakness. And then you showed up, this quiet, damaged guy who loved his daughter more than life itself and had the courage to risk everything for someone else's family. You're everything she never knew she needed. I'm a mechanic with PTSD and a 7-year-old daughter. You're a man who keeps his promises, who fights for what matters, who chose to be whole instead of hiding. That's rare, Caleb, and Victoria sees it even if you don't. This conversation is making me uncomfortable." "Good. You've been comfortable too long. Time to be challenged." Marcus stood, testing his balance, accepting Caleb's steadying hand without comment. "Just think about it, about what you want beyond just providing for Emma, about whether maybe, possibly, you deserve happiness that isn't conditional on being useful." The conversation stayed with Caleb through the following weeks as he built Hayes Defense Systems' Crisis Response Division from the ground up. He hired a team of 6 former military, intelligence backgrounds, people who understood the weight of the work they'd be doing. Together, they developed protocols for kidnapping response, political prisoner extraction, crisis consultation for families desperate enough to try anything. The first real mission came 3 months after the division launched. A journalist taken hostage overseas, family willing to pay ransom but needing guidance through the negotiation process. Caleb coordinated from Denver, using contacts Victoria had cultivated, and intelligence his team had gathered, and the journalist came home alive 2 weeks later. The second mission was a businesswoman trapped by civil unrest in a region where official channels had broken down. Caleb planned the extraction but sent his team to execute it, staying home because Emma had a school presentation, and he'd promised to be there. The team succeeded without him, proof that the division could function whether he deployed or not. And slowly, Carefully, Caleb started to believe that maybe Marcus was right. Maybe he could be both the father Emma needed and the operator who served a larger purpose. Maybe integration was possible after all. Emma thrived in Denver in ways that surprised them both. She made friends at her new school, joined the writing club, started writing stories about brave knights and wise princesses that her teacher praised as remarkably sophisticated for her age. She still drew her castles, but now they included more characters: herself, Caleb, Victoria, Marcus, even the horses. A family that had grown beyond what either of them had imagined possible. "Miss Hayes is coming to my writing competition tomorrow," Emma announced one evening at dinner. "Is that okay?" "Of course it's okay. Why wouldn't it be?" "I don't know. I just wanted to make sure. She's been coming to a lot of my stuff lately, and I didn't want you to think I was replacing you or anything." Caleb set down his fork, gave Emma his full attention. "You could never replace me, and having Victoria in your life doesn't diminish what we have. It adds to it. More people who care about you is always good." "Do you care about her? Like as more than just your boss?" There it was. The question Caleb had been avoiding for months, spoken with the blunt honesty only children could manage. "I think I might," he admitted. "Is that okay with you?" Emma considered this seriously. "Does she make you happy?" "Yeah, she does." "Does she make you less sad about the stuff you don't talk about but I know bothers you anyway?" "Too perceptive. Always too perceptive." "She helps?" "Having her around helps." "Then it's okay with me." "But Dad, if you're going to date her or whatever, you should probably actually tell her you like her. Because right now you both just make googly eyes at each other, and it's kind of awkward for the rest of us." Caleb laughed despite his embarrassment. "Googly eyes? Marcus says so. He says you're both emotionally constipated, and someone needs to just say something already. Marcus needs to mind his own business. Marcus is bored from physical therapy and likes stirring up drama. His words, not mine." Emma grinned. "But seriously, Dad, life's too short. You literally risk dying to save someone. Maybe risk being happy too." The writing competition the next day brought half the school's families out to watch their children navigate obstacle courses and timed runs. Emma rode with fierce concentration, her face scrunched in determination as she guided Star through the course. She didn't win. That honor went to a girl who'd been riding since she was 3. But she placed fourth and beamed with pride at the ribbon. Victoria cheered louder than anyone, her corporate composure abandoned in favor of genuine enthusiasm. She'd been coming to Emma's events for weeks now. School presentations, writing lessons, weekend activities that had nothing to do with work obligations, and everything to do with actually caring. After the competition, while Emma celebrated with her writing club friends, Victoria found Caleb standing by the fence. "She's remarkable," Victoria said. "Fearless but thoughtful. Just like her father. She's better than me. Braver. More willing to try new things without overthinking them. Maybe she learned that from watching you. You gave up everything familiar to give her a better life. That's pretty brave." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Emma laugh with her friends, and Caleb made a decision. Marcus was right. Emma was right. Life was too short to hide from possibilities. "Victoria, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you really doing all this? The job, the property, showing up to Emma's events, helping Marcus recover. You've gone way beyond repaying a debt. So what's actually happening here?" Victoria turned to face him, and Caleb saw vulnerability in her expression that he'd never witnessed before. "Do you want the professional answer or the honest one?" "Honest." "The honest answer is that somewhere between you agreeing to save Marcus and watching you build a life that honors all of who you are, I fell in love with you." She said it simply, without artifice or apology. "I fell in love with your integrity, your dedication to Emma, the way you keep your promises even when it costs you everything. The courage it takes to choose vulnerability over safety. And I know it's complicated. I'm your boss. I'm the reason you went on that mission. I'm probably too broken from my own trauma to be good relationship material. But you asked for honest, so there it is." Caleb's heart was hammering against his ribs, his mind trying to process words he'd half hoped to hear and half feared would complicate everything. "You're not broken," he said finally. "You're someone who survived impossible circumstances and chose to become better instead of bitter. Someone who fights for the people she loves with everything she has. Someone who's made room in her life for a 7-year-old girl and her damaged father without asking for anything in return. I'm asking now. Asking what? Asking if maybe you feel the same way. Asking if there's a chance we could try being something more than employer and employee, more than friends. Actually build something together instead of dancing around it. Caleb thought about Jennifer, about the promise he'd made to give Emma a good life, but also the conversation they'd had in her final weeks about not being alone forever. Thought about Emma's endorsement of Victoria, about Marcus's blunt assessment, about his own heart that had started opening despite his best efforts to keep it protected. I'm terrified, he admitted, of getting it wrong, of Emma getting hurt if things don't work out, of building something real and then losing it the way I lost Jennifer. I'm terrified too, of not being enough, of my company's history destroying what we could have, of loving someone and then watching them choose missions over presence the way everyone in my life eventually has. Victoria stepped closer. But I'm more terrified of playing it safe and regretting it forever. And Caleb, you taught me something when you went after Marcus. You taught me that some risks are worth taking even when the odds are terrible, even when failure means losing everything, because the alternative is living half a life. Emma's voice called across the field. Dad! Miss Hayes, come see my ribbon! They both looked toward the sound, watched Emma wave excitedly, her face radiant with uncomplicated joy. She's watching us, Caleb said. I know. If we do this, if we try this, it has to be real. Not just gratitude or convenience or two lonely people finding comfort. Real, complicated, messy, long-term real. I wouldn't want it any other way. Caleb took Victoria's hand, felt her fingers intertwine with his, and made another choice. Another leap into uncertain territory with nothing but faith and determination to guide him. Okay then, let's try. Victoria's smile was brilliant, transforming her face into something younger and more hopeful than Caleb had ever seen. Yeah? Yeah, but we're taking it slow for Emma's sake, and we're being honest with each other about when it's too much, or too hard, or too complicated. Deal? Deal. Emma reached them, breathless with excitement, and immediately noticed their joined hands. Her grin could have lit up the whole state. Finally! I told Marcus you'd figure it out eventually, but he said it would take at least another month. I win the bet. You bet on us? Caleb asked, torn between amusement and exasperation. Marcus bet on you. I had more faith. Plus I'm 7 and very wise for my age. Emma tugged on both their hands. Come on, everyone's getting ice cream, and I want to introduce Miss Hayes as my dad's girlfriend instead of just my dad's boss because that's way more interesting. We literally just agreed to try this 2 minutes ago, Victoria protested, but she was laughing. Yeah, but I've known for like 3 months, so this is old news to me. Keep up, grown-ups. They followed Emma to the ice cream truck, hand in hand, and Caleb felt something settle in his chest. Not the absence of fear. He was still terrified of getting this wrong, of failing the people who depended on him. But the presence of hope. The belief that maybe, possibly, he deserved this. Deserved happiness that wasn't conditional on utility or achievement. Deserved love that accepted all of him, including the broken pieces he'd tried so hard to hide. The months that followed were a study in careful building. Caleb and Victoria dated like adults. Dinners after Emma went to bed, weekend activities that included her, conversations about boundaries and expectations and what they each needed to feel safe. It wasn't always easy. Victoria's work demands sometimes conflicted with Caleb's need for presence. His occasional nightmares about the mission reminded them both that trauma didn't disappear just because you acknowledged it. But they worked through it, found rhythms that honored both their needs, built trust through honesty and showing up even when it was uncomfortable. Marcus recovered steadily, graduating from physical therapy to limited fieldwork consulting on missions that matched his expertise. He moved into his own place eventually, but came to family dinners every Sunday, his relationship with Victoria healing as they both learned to be siblings instead of just survivors. The Crisis Response Division grew, earning a reputation for discretion and effectiveness. Caleb ran 15 missions in the first year, deploying personally on 3 when the situation demanded his specific skills. Each time, he came home to Emma and Victoria, and each time it got a little easier to believe he could do both. Serve a larger purpose and maintain the relationships that mattered most. Emma turned 8, then 9, grew taller and more confident, started writing stories about heroes who were also parents, who saved people but always came home. Her teacher submitted one to a young writers competition, and Emma won, her face glowing with pride as she accepted the award with Caleb and Victoria cheering from the audience. "I wrote it about you," she told Caleb afterward, pressing the trophy into his hands. "About how heroes aren't just strong or brave. They're people who love something enough to fight for it, and then come home to the people who need them." Caleb held the trophy, this cheap plastic award that meant everything, and felt tears sting his eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Emma. Not just for winning, for understanding what really matters. I learned it from you, Dad, you and Victoria and Uncle Marcus. You all showed me that being broken doesn't mean being useless. It just means you're honest about the hard parts while still choosing to be good." That night, after Emma went to bed, Caleb found Victoria on the porch watching the stars emerge over the mountains. She'd been quieter than usual all evening, thoughtful in a way that suggested something significant was on her mind. "You okay?" he asked, settling into the chair beside hers. "I was thinking about the first time I saw you, in that cafe in Silver Ridge. How you took that hit and didn't fight back, and I knew immediately you were someone different. Someone who'd learned control the hard way. That feels like a lifetime ago." "It was, in a way. We're different people now than we were then." Victoria turned to face him, and Caleb saw something in her expression that made his breath catch. "I want to ask you something, and you can say no. You can take time to think about it. You can just ask, Victoria." She pulled a small box from her pocket, opened it to reveal a simple ring, nothing ostentatious, just elegant metal and a single stone that caught the starlight. "Marry me. Not because you owe me or because it's convenient or because Emma needs stability. Marry me because we've built something real. Because I love you and you love me and we're better together than apart. Because I want to spend whatever time we have building a life instead of just surviving one." Caleb stared at the ring, his mind spinning through 1,000 implications and possibilities. He thought about Jennifer's deathbed blessing, her insistence that he not spend his life alone. Thought about Emma's acceptance of Victoria, the way his daughter had bloomed with this expanded family. Thought about the man he'd become over the past year and a half. Still broken in places, but healing, still carrying scars, but no longer letting them define his entire existence. "Yes," he said, and watched Victoria's face transform with joy. "Yes, I'll marry you, but on one condition. Anything. We ask Emma first. Make sure she's ready for this. Make sure she knows what it means and that she's okay with all of it." Of course. I wouldn't want to do this without her blessing. They asked Emma the next morning over breakfast. Her response was to leap from her chair, throw her arms around both of them, and announce that she'd been waiting for this forever. And could she please be Flower Girl, and also could they get married somewhere with horses, because clearly horses made everything better. The wedding happened 6 months later on the property, a small ceremony with only the people who mattered most. Martha flew in from Silver Ridge, crying through the entire event, and insisting she'd known this would happen from the first moment she saw them together. Marcus served as best man, his speech full of jokes about how his sister had finally found someone stubborn enough to match her. Emma scattered flower petals with solemn importance, her dress covered in drawings of castles she'd designed specifically for the occasion. And Caleb stood at the altar watching Victoria walk toward him, feeling the weight of every choice that had led to this moment. The decision to save Marcus. The choice to move to Denver, the courage to try building something real instead of hiding in comfortable isolation. "You look terrified," Victoria whispered as she took his hand. "I am terrified, but I'm also happy. Both things can be true. Both things are always true. That's what makes it real." They spoke their vows under a sky that stretched infinite and blue, promising to choose each other through whatever came next. Promising to be honest about the hard parts and celebrate the victories. Promising to build a family that honored where they'd been while reaching for where they could go. When the ceremony ended and the celebration began, Emma pulled Caleb aside. "Are you happy, Dad? Really, truly happy?" "Yeah, sweetheart, I really am." "Good. Because you deserve it. You saved Uncle Marcus and helped all those other people, and you've been a really good dad even when things were hard. You deserve the happy ending." "This isn't an ending, Em. It's a beginning. Even better. She hugged him tight, then pulled back with a mischievous grin. But just so you know, I'm expecting a little brother or sister eventually. Uncle Marcus says you and Victoria need to get on that. Uncle Marcus needs to stop involving you in adult conversations. He says that too, but then he keeps doing it anyway because I'm a good listener. Caleb laughed, scooped Emma into his arms despite her protests that she was too big to be carried, and rejoined the celebration where Victoria was dancing with Marcus, where Martha was telling embarrassing stories to anyone who'd listen, where their team from the Crisis Response Division had shown up to toast their success. This was the life he'd built from the ashes of who he used to be, complex and messy and real, full of people who knew his scars and loved him anyway, full of purpose that served something larger than survival, full of a future that honored his past without being imprisoned by it. Later that night, after the guests had departed and Emma had finally crashed from sugar and excitement, Caleb and Victoria stood on the porch watching the stars emerge. "No regrets?" Victoria asked, her head resting against his shoulder. "About 1,000, but none of them about this." "Good answer." She was quiet for a moment, then, "Thank you." "For what?" "For being brave enough to risk everything to save my brother. For being brave enough to build a life that scares you. For being brave enough to love me, even though we both know how badly love can hurt. Thank you for seeing me. For recognizing something worth saving, even when I was convinced I wasn't worth the effort. You were always worth it, Caleb. You just needed time to believe it yourself." They stood together in comfortable silence, wrapped in each other in the knowledge that they'd survived the impossible and chosen to try for something better. Behind them, through the window, Emma slept peacefully in a home that held more love than she'd ever known. Ahead of them stretched a future full of uncertainty and possibility in equal measure. But they'd face it together, this family built from trauma and hope, from courage and second chances, from the choice to show up and keep fighting even when the odds were terrible and the costs were high. The ghosts were finally quiet. The debt was paid. And the man who wouldn't fight had learned that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was open your heart and let people in. It wasn't the ending Caleb had imagined when he took that slap in a mountain cafe and chose not to fight back. It wasn't the ending Victoria had envisioned when she started searching for answers about her missing brother. And it certainly wasn't the fairy tale Emma had drawn in her countless pictures of castles and knights. It was better. It was real. It was theirs. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the mountains stood sentinel in the darkness, Caleb Ward, former soldier, mechanic, father, husband, finally let himself believe that he'd earned this moment of peace, that the journey from darkness to light, from hiding to wholeness, from survival to actually living, had been worth every terrifying step. The knight had slayed his dragons, the princess had found her strength, and the castle they'd built together would stand for all the days to come, a testament to the truth that healing was possible, that love could triumph over trauma, and that the best victories were the ones that brought everyone home.